Alright YouTube, so we're back of course to talk about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and today we're back to discuss another theory. Of course, your boy found it on Reddit. I'm always on Reddit looking for stuff to talk about. And naturally, of course, it's a theory in regards to the ending of Remake Part 1, which is something I love discussing, even though we've discussed it a lot at this point. I'm trying to talk about every little thing I can in regards to this game and this ending and what's possibly happening before we actually get answers with the next game. So shout out to I Need Warmth for the Reddit post from the other day. Now, as usual, we don't need to read this. We're just going to talk about what's in the Reddit post. So essentially the way that their discussion and theory goes is that it's pretty odd that our group doesn't really discuss what happens within the Singularity at the end of the game once they're outside of it on the cliff outside of Midgar, which is something I can definitely agree with. It's always stuck out as kind of weird to me that our group doesn't have a conversation about this. I mean, they just fought this gigantic god monster in this portal that Sephiroth opened up at the end of a highway. It's a pretty strange situation. But then we get in reference to the events that happens within the Singularity is Barrett does ask Cloud, I thought you beat him, which obviously Cloud did not. So essentially their post is based off of the theory of us defeating the Whispers all throughout time, which is a pretty popular theory, of course. It's been out there since the game released over 2 years ago at this point. But their sort of spin on the theory is that maybe us defeating the Whispers all throughout time it made our group forget about the Whispers, which is maybe why they don't talk about it on the cliff outside of Midgar, which I think makes some sense. I mean, as far as we know, obviously time travel is a theory at this point. But that would be the case, right? If we defeated them in the past, then they weren't there to begin with. If we defeated them all throughout time, then they were never there for us to interact with them. Just think of every event that you can throughout the remake story where our group comes across the Whispers, like those events would not have taken place because they're defeated all throughout time. It creates a paradox, which is why I'm not the biggest fan of the theory of us defeating them all throughout time, because it just doesn't make any sense. The massive ripple effect from that would be so ridiculous we can't even fathom it. But that's if we're looking at it kind of logically or realistically. They can tell the story they want to tell. Like, we can defeat the Whispers all throughout time, and the only ripple effect of that is, like, Zack living and a couple other characters living, right? That can be the only outcome. It'd be kind of lazy and stupid, but that's what they could do. Obviously, there's a lot of unknowns right now when it comes to Remake, but I would assume that with this iteration of Gaia in Final Fantasy VII that we have in Remake, the Whispers have had to have been around for kind of ever, right? For the most part, since the planets existed, since the live streaming shits existed. I say that because, at least with the Remake story, their entire purpose is to make sure that the events of the original Final Fantasy VII happen, which means they'd have to have been around for at least decades, if not centuries, to make sure things fall in line so that things can happen. Things as simple as like Claudia meeting Cloud's father so they can get together and eventually have Cloud so that Cloud can be a part of the Final Fantasy VII story. Things like that, right? And it probably goes back even further than that. Making sure that Genova doesn't fully kill off all the ancients. They'd have to be there for that too. Shit like that, you know what I'm saying? So if we defeat them all throughout time, again, the butterfly effect from that would be astronomical. Anyways, I could go on forever about that topic. I'm going on a tangent there. So I do like the idea of our group maybe forgetting. That kind of does explain the lack of a conversation, but there's also a lot of unknowns here. For one, we don't know what they have and haven't talked about. Also, we don't know what they talked about on the Walk to Calm. Cloud also hasn't talked about the edge of creation to our group yet, presumably, but maybe that's something that he's got to wait for the right moment for, because that's a pretty heavy conversation. If he could even attempt to explain what transpired there. I mean, how do you even bring up that conversation? Like, I don't know, guys, I was just throwing an attack at Sephiroth, an explosion happened, then I was taken through a portal to the edge of creation, standing between the universe of death and the universe of creation, talking to Sephiroth on a giant rock. And we had a sword fight. Okay, how do you bring that up? So again, we don't know what they have or haven't talked about, and we may get a flashback or a cutscene at some point where they do discuss it or talk about it, or maybe they talk about it sometime during the events of Part 2. Like, we don't know if they're going to talk about it at some point. But I, of course, do agree that it's weird. I feel like that's a conversation that I'd be one to have as soon as possible. You know, after we're already outside the Singularity on the cliff outside of Midgar, I feel like that's one of the first things I want to discuss is, like, what did we just actually do? Like, what the fuck just happened, guys? So the idea of us defeating the Whispers all throughout time and our group possibly forgetting them, there are some problems with this. For one, we've talked about it for a while now, that our group is more than likely protected from whatever happens while they're inside the Singularity. So whenever we defeat the Whispers, the change happens around the world, whatever the shit alters, that our group would probably still remember because they were inside the Singularity. Also, the fact that Barrett even mentions Sephiroth, right? I thought you beat him, which should mean that our group remembers the events that took place within inside the Singularity, where our group fought and seen a shit ton of Whispers, and also, of course, fought Sephiroth. So I don't personally think that our main core group forgot about the Whispers. Maybe it's possible that everybody outside the Singularity did. If we defeated them all throughout time, then, you know, everybody who's ever seen a Whisper just doesn't remember them. They never were there or existed. I don't know. They do make a point to point out the line that Aerith says before we walk through the portal into the Singularity, where she says that by changing destiny, we will be changing ourselves, and that maybe she means literally, not just like our future and what takes place, like literally right here, right now, we're going to be changing ourselves, which maybe is in reference to them forgetting shit. Which I do think is a nice observation, but I don't think that that's necessarily what she means. Also, completely off topic here. It's something I've been wanting to ask for a while. I keep forgetting to do it in videos when we talk about the ending of the game. Do we have an answer for what it is exactly that Aerith does to that portal? Like, she does some sort of magic shit, turns the portal like a white color, but like, what is she actually doing to the portal, and why is she doing it? Do we have an answer for that? Is it in Ultimania? I have no idea. It's something that has just always stuck out to me, and I need a motherfucking answer. And one of the other issues with this theory, in terms of like us defeating the Whispers all throughout time, that they actually mentioned in their own Reddit post, is like the scene where Barret gets stabbed by Genova Sephiroth, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to call him Sephiroth. Like, the Whispers wouldn't be there to make sure Barret does not die, but again, the ripple effect, right? If we're defeating them all throughout time, that stab might not have happened, but also, I'm almost like 1,000% certain that Sephiroth is stabbing Barret knowing he's not going to die, right? He knows about the Whispers, he knows what they are, he knows they're going to protect him, he knows what they're there to do, keep the FF7 story intact. It's not Barret's fate to die here, so more than likely we defeated the Whispers all throughout time. If the Whispers are not there in this scene, then this Sephiroth's not going to stab Barret. Look, there's obviously a lot of problems with this theory. We talked about that in this video. They even kind of mentioned on their Reddit post. I don't personally think our group forgot about the Whispers. I just don't think they've either had the conversation yet, or they did and we're going to see it at a later point, or maybe they had the conversation off screen and we just don't really need to see that as a player. But I do think there is some merit to the idea of people forgetting about the Whispers by us defeating them, maybe all throughout time. So maybe it's possible that the world forgot about it, everybody outside the Singularity. So maybe people that have like visibly seen the Whispers, so whenever they attack the Sector 7 slums, Jesse Biggs Wedge, and maybe a lot of other people within the slums seen them, and maybe when we come in contact with some of those characters later, they won't remember that stuff happening. I do believe that that could be a possibility, but as with a lot of theories, I don't know how much weight it holds. I don't know how even important that is. Like, what's the point of everybody forgetting? Who cares? What does it really affect? Especially if the Whispers are completely defeated now. If they're completely gone, they no longer exist, then it wouldn't even matter if everybody remember them, because it's not like they're going to do anything anymore. But my dudes, I think that's going to be pretty much the video, so of course pass off to you guys. Several questions here. For one, this particular theory, do you think our group forgot about the Whispers? Do you think other people forgot about the Whispers? Maybe our group didn't. But also, in terms of our group not talking about it, did that always bother you too? Do you think they're going to have a conversation about what transpired inside the Singularity? Is Cloud ever going to talk about the edge of creation to our group? Like, I feel like that's a pretty important conversation too. Like, actually, I'm going to throw this in here at the end because it just hit me as I'm finishing up recording this video. The idea of our group forgetting everything, Aerith talking about us changing fate means we're going to change ourselves. What if all that is maybe a possibility and an answer for why we get a reset going into the next game? Well, we step into the next game and we're level like 1 or whatever and we don't have a lot of materia because we forgot everything. We changed everything. Just throwing that out there. Anyways, my dudes, that's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the show if you guys aren't interested in more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter, @YT. I'm a Discord. Links to my Star in the description. In the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.